Have you guys ever heard of a thing called toxic positivity? It's the idea that it is possible to be too positive about things, refusing to acknowledge some of the negative emotions one might feel. And if you've ever seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Lately, it feels like I've been hyping up Atlanta, obviously, because I personally love living here. It's a great city, and if you've been keeping up with my other videos, I can find countless reasons why that's true. Nevertheless, in order to give a well-rounded and full spectrum understanding of what it might feel like to live here in Atlanta, I've decided to embrace the dark side. I'm your least hated Atlanta realtor, Tim Trevathan, and today let's tackle the top 5 worst things about living in the Atlanta suburbs. Number 1 on that list is traffic and limited public transportation. Firstly, the thing that any seasoned veteran of living in Atlanta will tell you is that the traffic here is horrible. Unlike other major metropolitan areas in the United States, like New York City, Chicago, or San Francisco, our infrastructure relies heavily on having a car in order to do basically anything. While we do have ample parking to make up for that, it can make those without a personal vehicle or unaccustomed to driving feel like their mobility around town is severely limited. You might see pictures of our impressive 16-lane highway in downtown Atlanta and think that a road of that size could never get clogged. But you might be surprised just how bad it can get during rush hour on a weekday, when driving from City Center to Johns Creek can take anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. Luckily, gas prices in Atlanta tend to be about 15 cents lower than the US average, but it can still quickly add up, especially if your work requires a daily commute. In fact, according to Clever.com, Atlanta is ranked the 3rd worst city for commuters, and we are tied for having the highest annual cost of fuel. Unfortunately, these problems aren't necessarily alleviated with a robust public transportation system either. While there are MARTA buses and our lovely MARTA light rail system that crisscrosses all across the perimeter, the number of stops are quite limited, and there's some resistance to expansion from the constituent voters of suburban Atlanta. In fact, I did a whole video on that topic where I go into massive in-depth detail, so be sure to check that out. All in all, if you're the type of person who enjoys long commutes in standstill traffic, Atlanta is the city for you. One other thing I would mention as well, having gone to places like LA, New York City, Chicago, and driven through them, some of those places, yes, the traffic is worse than here, but the drivers are quite crazier here. Number 2 would be weather, smog, pollen, and air quality overall. We do have a full spring season here, and with it comes Georgia's infamous spring allergy season. No matter where you go in Atlanta, you'll find that there's a lot of trees everywhere, which can bring a wonderful sense of oneness with nature, but also the looming dread of pollen. Come spring, you'll find every outdoor surface sprinkled with a fine layer of yellow because of our many oak, birch, pine, cedar, hickory, and sweet gum trees. In actuality, according to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation's 2023 study on cities with the worst pollen, Atlanta is very low on the list at 90 out of 100. So compared to other cities, you may not experience allergies as much year-round, just right around late March and early April, when things kick into high gear. Another thing to mention about the air is the temperature. While spring and fall can feel very temperate and lovely for about a month or 2 out of the year, the rest of the time can feel like sweltering heat. While certainly we don't rank among the hottest cities in the US, say Houston, anybody? Atlanta's summer can melt you down with June, July, and August having average 90-degree highs. If you're used to cold weather, this can come as quite a shock. In the winter, the weather is quite mild, but on occasion we'll have a stray snowstorm, which can lock the city down in panic. Our panic, I always equate it to LA's panic when they get a little bit of rain. Unlike cities where snow and ice are more common, Atlanta is still very unprepared for snow days, and even rumors of half an inch of snow can cause a run at the supermarket where everyone's stocking up on milk, eggs, and bread for the next week. This can even happen whenever we have news of a looming hurricane, that rarely comes, but it can make its way to Georgia. But by the time it does, it's usually a weakened tropical storm. But going back to the winter weather, the roads, when it gets icy, can be very dangerous to drive on since they won't be well maintained for winter weather. I like to make a quick mention of the air quality as well. Atlanta's air quality has been improving, but it's still considered a failing grade, especially when it comes to ground level ozone and particulates in the air, which can make living here with breathing problems dangerous. According to the American Lung Association, Atlanta has the 4th worst air quality in the Southeast and is ranked 51st most populated city for smog in the nation. Clearly, a lot can be done to improve in these areas.
Chemical plant near Atlanta is now facing several class action lawsuits after a fire broke out there, sending potentially harmful fumes into the air.
When I used to work for the EPA, our job was to investigate tragedies like this. And now, the air in Georgia is being destroyed.
Next on the list is limited entertainment options. The suburbs of Atlanta can be plenty of fun, but only if you know where to look. Because of urban sprawl being what it is, it can be hard to discover new places organically, and the lack of walkable places in the suburbs will require some research before you set off to go have some fun. Sure, we've got malls, movie theaters, arcades, parks, bowling alleys, and whatever else you could be seeking, but the suburbs are going to be much quieter than a bustling city with tightly packed restaurants, shops, events, and plenty of things to see. Life here isn't going to be rich with new developments and new things to do every day, but if you keep a close ear to the ground and keep watch on social media, you can always find something new and interesting within a quick drive, but you still have to drive. One thing I like to point out is in the suburbs, my favorite season during the time of living in the suburbs is the fall season because there's so many festivals, whether it's the Swanee Town Center Festival or the Duluth Fall Festival or Japan Fest, the Korean Festival during their holiday seasons. It is absolutely amazing, and there's so much going on during the fall. But again, you just have to be aware of what events are taking place. Next on the list is limited job opportunities and education opportunities. Atlanta has plenty of good schools, but options are indeed limited. Everyone is well aware of the rankings and the ratings, so good schools are in extremely high demand. And purchasing a home in a neighborhood surrounding these schools can be just as competitive as the schools themselves. The top universities in the Atlanta area are no better. While Georgia Institute of Technology is considered a highly exclusive school with an acceptance rate of 16%, Emory has a whopping 11%. Georgia State University has a 61% acceptance rate, and the University of Georgia, which is a bit further away in Athens, has an acceptance rate of 40%. And while Georgia is home to headquarters for several enormous multinational corporations like Home Depot, Delta, and the Coca-Cola Company, it can still feel like job opportunities are limited, especially for those who wish to work remotely. Corporate jobs in Atlanta can feel highly competitive compared to other major cities, and Atlanta is certainly a huge job hub for the entire Southeast that just makes life here all the more in demand. In fact, I'll give you a first-hand example where my wife, she worked at Gwinnett County for a little while, and her position, the applications on that one position had 81 applicants in total. Whew, that's a lot of demand. Still, the job growth rate in Atlanta is higher than the national average, 2.47% compared to the national 1.81%, which means while it might feel tight for now, things may start to loosen up with more opportunities in the future. Last but not least on the list, suburban culture and economic disparity. There aren't a lot of uniquely bad things about Atlanta when it comes to economic disparity that you won't see in other major cities, but it's still absolutely worth mentioning. Suburbs are built off of the idea of exclusivity and separation. Atlanta has a very strong culture of suburbanization, and this is reflected in the fact that Atlanta is considered to have the worst economic disparity in the country, drawn across racial lines that can be seen both in a history of redlining Black families from home ownership to the income inequality we still see today. This can lead to the kind of blindness that a lot of suburbanites fall prey to, where suffering becomes invisible and therefore irrelevant. People form tight-knit communities in suburbs based around their shared interests, race, religion, and other affiliations, but it's important to remember that we're all part of the same Atlanta community, and raising up our neighbor, no matter who they are, will simultaneously raise all of us up in turn, and maybe we can get rid of this idea that suburbs are a place of exclusion. It can be hard to find your community when you first move to Atlanta, but hopefully we can all become more welcoming people and embrace those who are like ourselves and very much unlike ourselves to create a truly unified Atlanta community. That was rough, but if you've stuck with me until now, that means you now have a more complete idea of the cons of living in Atlanta. So kudos to you for your commitment to making the best possible choices you can make when it comes to finding your next dream home. Life isn't always easy, fun, and happy, so it will only serve you to be equipped with the truth, good or bad. Still, maybe there's something about Atlanta that's gotten on your nerves while living here that I haven't mentioned. I would love to hear from you, so leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Or if you want to talk more directly, I'm always open to discuss the pros and cons of living in different various suburban cities here in Metro Atlanta. So reach out via text, DM, email, or phone call, and let's get down to brass tacks. As always, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you again next time. Tim Trevathan, signing off.